Coming up in this edition of Week in Review, the Christchurch City Council signed off on some of the Mayor's recommendations for both the long-term and annual plans. Environment Canterbury cracks down on high water users. And a Christchurch Boys High student hits the big time in Melbourne. Welcome to CTV News Week in Review. I'm Tanya Green. Council approved final last-minute financials for the annual and long-term plans earlier this week, with more cash splashed across several different city initiatives. The main point of call, the Council's relationship with central government, with talk of the potential breaking in of regeneration legislative framework. Chelsea Daniels reports.
The council will add $1 million to the city's mental health services, reallocated from the Earthquake Memorial Fund, with the government to match contributions for the next 3 years.
And I don't think it's right. I think that if people make a contribution to the relief of the city, then they are entitled to know that their money was spent on the city.
Mayor Leanne Dalzell hopes to set a precedent with the relationship between the community and both local and central governments.
I think that this is the beginning of a new way of operating between central and local government. I don't buy people saying that's the government's responsibility.
It's an opportunity, she says, likens itself to the way different agencies work together post-disaster.
I mean, that's the thing that people remember most about the post-earthquake period. All the silos came down, people all worked together, and it didn't really matter which part of government, local government, or the NGO sector that you came from.
The Mayor stresses the people of Christchurch are both rate and taxpayers, so it's only fair both governments work together to help.
Why wouldn't we want to work with central government to achieve better outcomes for our communities? Why wouldn't we? And why wouldn't we want to engage in community-led processes to achieve that?
Some other changes to the 2016-17 annual plan and amended long-term plan were approved, taking the Mayor's recommendations. An additional $1.7 million is to be used to fix footpaths. $400,000 is to be used to start a council philanthropic fund, and a 25% discount for children from low-income families at all council-owned swimming pools. The adoption of the annual plan will take place on Thursday. Chelsea Daniels, CTV News.
Millions of litres of Canterbury's famous drinking water has been obtained illegally, found through information obtained through the Official Information Act. But ECAN have maintained their consent process is diligent. However, there are reports of hundreds of large-scale users getting away with excessive water usage, as Chelsea Daniels explains.
Environment Canterbury's boss says they won't be so lenient this year when it comes to smacking high water users with prosecution. The call comes amidst reports of millions of litres being obtained illegally by large-scale users, that being farmers, since the agency introduced water metering in 2012.
We haven't yet moved to what I would call a full prosecution regime, where a really bad offender is prosecuted for what is effectively taking water over and above their consent.
While several investigations have taken place over the last 2 seasons, none have resulted in prosecutions, including 4 potential prosecutions just last year. There were 376 instances in the 2012-13 season where high users have slipped by unscathed.
A number of those incidences may well have been real, but the difficulty of taking the prosecution, it's quite a high test. And I would say that we're on a learning curve just as much as the farming community is as they learn to comply.
However, Forrest and Burt says enough is enough.
It seems a bit like that's an excuse for not doing their job rather than kind of fronting up and acknowledging that there's an issue there and they need to work on it. And they've got a regulatory body with strong powers to enforce compliance, and so they should be able to obtain the evidence they need for breaches.
A majority of those with consents will submit their water data usage for the last season this month, with ECAN planning to crack down on those who continue to use above their limits. They say the 500 consent holders yet to install meters have been contacted. Chelsea Daniels, CTV News.
A few complaints around the excessive noise of a flying fox has been met with overwhelming opposition. The flying fox was installed in Preston subdivision in Marshland by Ngaitahu, and the line was removed after complaints started. I went along to test it out for myself. A piece of equipment enjoyed for years. But this flying fox in Marshland is only an annoyance to neighbouring properties. Installed by Ngaitahu in Preston subdivision, the line has been taken down after residents complained about the noise.
I rang up the council and I said, well, hold on a minute, who's complaining? And they said, well, there's 2 or 3 complaints. And I was like, well, I know at least 100 people who are very keen for it to stay. And the council went, oh, okay. Well, we didn't realise that it was that one-sided, so the council said, right, we'll put a stop on it.
Mr Reid ran a petition to bring the flying fox back with clear support to have the equipment in the area.
My family and a few other people went around collecting signatures one weekend, and we got over 300 signatures for the petition, and it's still going. They're coming in daily on my email. Yeah, so we're well over 300 signatures.
When it was tested back in March, this flying fox out in Lincoln came in at just over 46 decibels, which does comply with the city's daytime noise limit of 50 decibels, but it doesn't comply with the nighttime limit, that's 41 decibels. Christchurch City Councillor Glenn Livingston has been testing other flying foxes like this one for noise level to see if the same type could fix the fox.
It was quieter, the bit of noise was going through the poles, but the one especially at the Rolleston Community Park I thought was really good. The actual mechanism was encased where it joins the cable and seemed to be very quiet. So, you know, if we can look at these options, we could find a way to keep everyone happy.
The petition will be put forward to the Burwood Pegasus Community Board next month. Tanya Green, CTV News. That story was a lot of fun. Well, coming up next on Week in Review, 2 former Cashmere High School students hit a big break early on in their careers, and we'll have the latest sporting highlights from the week. Welcome back. The importance of mental health services in Canterbury is unmistakable, and the funding has been constantly scrutinised since the earthquakes. But should the Christchurch City Council front the cost of Cantabrians' wellbeing? Mayor Leanne Dalzell asked councillors to help the government in mental health funding for the next 3 years.
The Christchurch City Council will decide whether to inject extra money to help with the city's mental health services. In a joint partnership with the Ministry of Health, the government will match up to $1 million a year for the next 3 years.
People have got to be at the centre of this. They haven't been at the centre of this rebuild and recovery, I don't believe, for the last 4 or 5 years, and now I think we're seeing the result of that.
Councillor Jones hit back at plans for the council to help with homelessness last year. Deputy Mayor Vicky Buck wanted the city to spend up to $400,000 towards leasing of private rentals for homeless people, with Councillor Jones saying the issue is for central government to solve. However, in this case, she says the problem's different.
This is match funding, so you've got the government putting up some money, you've got the City Council putting up some money as well.
A major concern: mental health in women and children.
One of the recent wellbeing reports out of Sarah showed very clearly that women were one of the main groups severely affected by the stress. As I said, it doesn't discriminate, but when you've got a group like that, and I'm one of them, and they're my age as well, I feel an affinity with that particularly. But
Christchurch Mayor Leanne Dalzell hopes councillors will vote in favour for the funding, along with approving the 2016-17 annual plan and confirming changes to the long-term plan. Council will also decide whether to change proposed rates from the initial 7.18% to around 5%, to approve an additional $1.7 million to fix footpaths, to spend $400,000 to create the City Foundation for community projects, and whether to reduce capital released from Christchurch City Holdings Limited from $750 million to $600 million. The decision on the funding will be discussed tomorrow. Chelsea Daniels, CTV News.
The Innovation Precinct welcomed its first anchor tenant this week, Cantabrian outdoor clothing and equipment company Kathmandu. But the Minister of Innovation says it's only the beginning. He expects the precinct to be the brain centre within the hustle and bustle of the city, where creative minds come together and create the world's next big ideas. Chelsea Daniels was there.
Puffer jackets galore this morning as the Innovation Precinct welcomes its first tenant. Christchurch is now home to Kathmandu's $20 million world headquarters, seeing over 150 employees moving in. Minister Stephen Joyce says the race is on, with all the city's precincts gaining momentum.
No, I've been for a walk around this morning and there's a lot of buildings going up, and so it's a bit of a race on. The precinct, I think the innovation precinct probably got away a bit quicker in some ways, but then you look around the city now and it's really starting to take shape.
He says the Innovation Precinct is a place for creative minds to connect, modernising the business world.
It's going to become a very important address in Christchurch, this precinct, because it's all about innovation. It's all about, frankly, taking Christchurch past the rebuild and into the future.
Kathmandu was born in the mid-80s, entering a marketplace where outdoor clothing and equipment was limited. The first New Zealand store opened in Christchurch. Now 25 years on, the Garden City is home base.
This is our roots. Kathmandu was born here, the company was born here, it's grown up here. It's now full-grown adult, big company across Australia and New Zealand and exporting now to the world.
The Innovation Precinct covers an area of nearly 4 hectares in the southeast corner of the urban frame. Vodafone moves next door next month, and the Wynyard Group soon after. Chelsea Daniels, CTV News.
2 former Cashmere High School students have made a big break very early on in their careers. They've helped produce a documentary called 30 Million, digging into issues surrounding climate change in Bangladesh. A young filmmaking duo who taught themselves their video skills from YouTube have won a world-class award for their recent documentary. Past Cashmere High School pupils, they were recommended to assist on the project by their head teacher.
He's just said to us, so do you guys have passports? And we're like, yeah. I was like, cool, just checking. And they were like, what? Why?
Shot in Bangladesh with 2 overseas filmmakers, 30 Million looks at the impact rising sea levels would have on the country, now gaining worldwide attention with the duo winning the Foreign Film Award in the American Conservation Film Festival.
So we went to enter the film into the festival, and we were told that the submissions had actually closed for it, but they liked the film so much that they put it in anyway, and it ended up winning the best foreign film. So yeah, it was a pretty awesome thing.
They didn't plan on taking this career path through high school, but it's given them a successful head start.
And we'd been doing paid work and stuff throughout our last year of high school anyway, so we thought we may as well start a business. And at the end of the first year, we were like, well, let's just do another year. And now we're getting through this year and we're like, well, let's just do another year, because this kind of seems like the best thing we could be doing, and anything else seems like a downgrade.
I feel like 30 Million is really, it hits hard emotionally. We get right in there. There are times where we actually stay with all these locals from Bangladesh. We took a seaplane down to some of the islands down south, ended up staying some of the villages there, and it was incredible. We got right in with the people, which I think really hits home and comes across in the documentary.
The awards ceremony is in October, but the boys are still unsure if they can head over to West Virginia to join in on the celebration. Tanya Green, CTV News.
If the boat of Bangladesh sinks, then the boat of the other countries are also going to sink.
Join us back in a few minutes for this week's sporting highlights. Welcome back to CTV News Week in Review. A Kaiapoi school has jumped on board to help a fellow pupil battling cancer. An event was held featuring some rugby superstars greeted by colour and vibrancy in the first ever Wig Wednesday. Fraser Walker-Pearce explains.
They're colourful, weird and wacky, but they're a symbol for those battling cancer. Kaiapoi Borough School took part in the country's inaugural Wig Wednesday in support of their classmate battling leukaemia. The school put on a gold coin donation mufti day, raising funds for the Child Cancer Foundation, putting on a special welcome for some rugby royalty. 12-year-old Luke Tom is fighting cancer, but with the help of his mates and teachers, his day was brightened by his Crusaders heroes Jimmy Tupou, David Havili and Richie Mo'unga.
I got picked out of a crowd, out of cancer children, and I got picked, and it was quite I was quite lucky to get picked, and grateful.
Raising $400 for the charity, the total was more than the number of pupils at the school.
Today we've raised about $400, so that's a pretty decent chunk.
And what's that going to go towards?
Some new hair for me? No, it's actually going to go towards the Child Cancer Foundation, and will help fund the ways that they support families.
The event saw a game of touch between pupils and teachers. Even the Crusaders joined in.
New Zealand's so small, and we all know someone that's sort of been impacted, by cancer, and sort of putting smiles on kids' faces and people that have been affected. It's so easy for us, but it makes a huge difference to people that have been affected.
It's an event they hope will continue to help more young Cantabrians like Luke. Fraser Walker-Pearce, CTV News.
To sport now, and last Saturday's match between St Andrews and Shirley Boys High headlined the 9th round of the UC Championship. And after losing the Mosca Cup last Tuesday, it wasn't a good end to the week for St Andrews. However, the weekend came with a silver lining, as Gordon Finlater reports.
It didn't take long for St Andrews to look like they were ready to bounce back from Tuesday's loss to Timaru Boys High. The UC Championship's top point scorer, Sam Gilbert, crossing the line before converting his own try. Shirley replied just minutes later with a penalty from Jackson Taylor. However, it would be St Andrews who would cross the line again next. Big winger Alapate Gonorogo dotting down in the right-hand corner. The home side held an 11-point lead, but that would be their last points of the afternoon. Shirley got in before the break. Jackson Taylor broke a tackle, offloading to Logan Bell, who would put through Samson Lale Sianofa. Shirley boys would waste no time claiming the lead when the match resumed. First in, Morgan Griffin. Then it was flanker Glenn Beardsley. Shirley would wrap things up with 5 minutes to play, captain Josh Archer grabbing the bonus point try. The final score, Shirley Boys 27, St Andrews 14. Taking a look at other results from around the region now, and Nelson's win over Timaru Boys High means it's not all bad news for Stack, who now have a chance to win back the Mowaska Cup when they head north this weekend. Christ College remain at the top of the table after defeating Marlborough, while Christchurch Boys High also had a win. At the other end of things, it's still tough going for Ron Carley and Lincoln, who are both yet to taste victory in this year's competition. Gordon Finlater, CTV Sport.
And just a reminder, you can catch a repeat of this weekend's UC Championship, where St Bede's take on Christchurch Boys High on Sunday night at 8 o'clock right here on CTV. Well, finally, a young basketballer was flown to Melbourne this week, competing with the top players from Oceania and Asia. The Basketball Without Borders program has seen a number of camp attendees go on to bigger and brighter ventures. And as Gordon Finlater reports, the sky's the limit for one Christchurch Boys high baller.
With the first pick in the 2015 NBA Draft, the Minnesota Timberwolves select Karl Anthony Towns from the University of Kentucky.
Karl Anthony Towns was selected as first pick in last year's NBA Draft. Towns and Boston Celtics star Isaiah Thomas attended the 4-day Nike All-Asia camp last week in Beijing. The top young players from throughout Asia are eligible to take part, with New Zealand putting up 2 representatives, one of them from Christchurch Boys High. It's fair to say 17-year-old Quinn Clinton enjoyed mingling with the stars.
Isaiah came and worked out with the point guards and stuff, and Kat was there, so it was pretty cool. Just seeing what he was up to and stuff. And they were pretty cool guys. So
it's been pretty surreal meeting the rest of the guys.
Yeah, no, it was because he was in just ahead of me in the drill, so he'd dap us up and stuff. So it was pretty. He's one of my favourite players, so it was pretty cool.
The young Kiwi can expect more mingling, leaving for Melbourne today, attending Australia's first ever Basketball Without Borders camp, headlined by the presence of 2-time NBA champion David Robinson. 1995's most valuable player is ranked amongst some of the greatest ever big men to play the game. For Clinton, though, he he's pretty relaxed about the whole thing.
I'm just going to go on and work as hard as I can, and just like there'll be professional coaches there, so just soak up as much as I can and just have a really good week.
The Australian event isn't the only chance Clinton has had to showcase himself on the world stage. The Cantab shot 28 points for New Zealand in the televised under-16 Oceania qualifying match against Australia last year. No wonder those from Division 1 United States colleges are after his service.
My favourite week of basketball was my worst week of basketball, because beating them was like the all-time high, and then losing was the all-time low. So, it was a good week of basketball. I learned a lot.
Who knows what Clinton will go on to achieve? One day his name could be called on draft night. Gordon Findlater, CTV Sport.
And that's CTV News Week in Review. The CTV News team will be back on Monday at 5:30 with more Canterbury news. I'm Tanya Green. Have a great weekend.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.